TV.
Good morning and welcome to Operational Excellence Week Canada Day 2. My name is Nicole Bamford and I'm the moderator for today's session. On behalf of Leslie, Angelique, Grant, Quinn, Candice and I, we thank you for joining us for today's event. This panel presentation, Process Mining, Your New Superpower Providing Direct Visibility into Your Business Processes, will be given by Biju Misra, Director Operations, Corporate Business Services and Automation at Enbridge, Leanne Van Zwieten, Assistant Vice President, Continuous Improvement at Manulife, Rudina Holmqvist, Business Consultant at TELUS, and your panel moderator today will be Frederic Brosseau, President and Founder at Akuting. Before we get started, here are some quick administrative points. During the webinar, if you have questions for the panel, please submit them in the Q&A box on your screen, and these will be answered during the question portion of the webinar. Likewise, for any technical issues, please write them into the Q&A section and we'll get to them right away. The widgets on your screen can be resized and dragged around for your viewing preferences. We encourage you to visit the Resource Center on your screen for additional content and resources we and our sponsors have provided for you. So make sure you're sitting comfortably, and I'll now hand it over to Frederic so we can begin.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm super happy and very proud to host this panel. For those who attended last year's conference, I gave a presentation then on process mining, and I asked the audience to raise their hand who had ever heard about process mining, and there was only one person in the attendance who raised his hand. And I said at the conclusion of this presentation that my hope was to come back next year and have a panel of Canadian companies that had had the first experience in the first project. So I'm super, super excited to have three of the leading organizations with us today that will be able to share their experience. For those who don't know process mining, a quick summary or quick definition would be that process mining is a new discipline that blends at the same time data science, so algorithms, and process improvement methodologies to provide process improvement professionals like you a direct visibility into the processes and the activities taking place in the organization by looking and diving into the transaction logs that your operational systems will keep as different activities done by humans or by robots or by information systems do. So really, it's a tool that provides visibility, understand where your bottlenecks are, where your different variants. It's used to manage compliance and process performance. So before we start and we start discussing, we thought we would try to get the feel from the audience about where you're at currently with process mining in your organization. So if you would take the next 15, 20 seconds to read the question and select which of the options best describe your current situation. Thank you in advance. Okay, so we have most of you, 2/3 of them, say that you would like to launch a project in the next 12 months, and then 1/3 of you have not yet considered the project. So we hope that our discussions and the experience of our panelists will help those of you that would like to launch a project to get some experience and insights and learn from the experience of our Canadian leaders. And those who have not yet considered it, we hope that by the end of this presentation, you may find some value into considering it. So thank you very much for your participation on that quick poll. If we start by looking at the different panelists, I think that the first question I would have for you is that what does process mining means for you and for your organization? So what are your expectations of process mining? And when you started originally the project, what is it that you thought could bring value to your organizations?
Hi. So yeah, if I may start, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so process mining. I learned about process mining actually about a year ago at the same conference. I was one of those quiet people who didn't raise their hand because I had not heard about it. And I'll just talk a bit about a little bit my journey at TELUS, how we got to here. And I have a story to start with. So years ago, when I was living in the Middle East, my husband was working for an early telecommunications company there, and their company, they used to refer to data as the next oil. And in just a similar way where in order to derive value out of oil, you have to use it. And the same thing with data. And we have a lot of data right now. People talk a lot about big data. And when I heard about process mining last year at this conference, I was really fascinated in that it really truly made use of the data that's already sitting in your enterprise systems and converts it into your process model. I've been a practitioner of process improvement for many years now, and have spent a lot of time trying to understand current state, building process maps, begging and pleading our BI teams to pull a report here, to develop a dashboard there. And when I learned about process mining, I felt that it really was a key enabler in understanding with data, with true facts, how your business currently behaves. So that's and just like a good financial advisor says, make the money work for you instead of you working for money. I feel that in process mining, you make the data work for you instead of you having to work for your data, which has been my experience. So yeah, that's been my experience with process mining.
Thanks.
And maybe I'll go next. So I think Rudina hit it like right on, right? So I think my experience was the same. I think we were probably at the same conference when it kind of started to pique interest. But it didn't really kind of take its own shape until we started driving some of the automation and process automation. And one of the things that Rudina said was also that part of process automation is really understanding what the current state is, and it requires a lot of energy. And I don't think, in general, if you look at organizations across, I don't think any organization can claim that they're the best when it comes to documentation or really knowing current state, because people tend to be fluid and things tend to change. So this was our use and application started by saying, how do you cut that time down? Really understanding what's going on, so that the identification of those manual steps or how the process is actually working can then be used to automate as you go. Right, and we found some good examples of it. That's part one. The other one is, I think when you look at large-scale system changes, you look at capability building over time, because organizations are more digital or a lot of processes are in digital form, I think it's a great way to really see if the changes, the investment you're making into building capabilities is actually resulting in something, versus I just want a purple button because I just want a purple button. And a lot of organizations spend a lot of time and money and energy building capability that may never be used, or can't really figure out whether that actually resulted in what they really wanted to. I think process mining has a huge role to play. Frederic, like you said, is the combination of those two and really getting the intelligence to see if the investment you made actually makes sense or not. So that's kind of but yeah, thank you for the conference, because it triggered all these thoughts.
Great, and I'll go last here. No, and my journey also started at the conference last year, and I was like Rudina, one of the people who didn't raise their hand. When I learned about it, it really clicked, because the organization that I was working with at the time, that was with Rogers, so telco as well, like Rudina. We were struggling, I think, to find, to stitch together the life cycle of a customer. If you think about, someone thinking about maybe buying a phone or whatever, all the way, getting a phone, being, having the phone work for them, changing plans over time, being serviced, et cetera, we were struggling and looking for a way to get more insights into what that life cycle really looked like. And when I heard about process mining, I realized that could be a really great way to get that insight. For example, and I was working with a lot of engineers at the time, and we, a lot of us had worked in manufacturing in the past, and where, there is this concept of, walking the gemba, where you go down to the shop floor and you actually look with your eyes and see what's happening. But in a digital world or a technology organization, whether it's telco or insurance, where I currently work, there is no shop floor where you can actually see what's happening. And so when we learned about process mining, realized that this is our way to walk the gemba. Like it's our way to actually see the variabilities in the process as opposed to just the process that we thought we designed. So that's really what it meant for me, and what triggered sort of my really deep interest in process mining.
Thank you so much, Leanne. So I think all of you share the importance, or you were looking for visibility in your processes, because in today's age, it's more and more difficult to have visibility on what people are actually doing, especially when we have robots and systems that are doing more and more of the task in an automated fashion. But it's not because it's automated that it's necessarily efficient. And certainly process mining enables you to keep a view on the productivity and the different efficiencies of your products. Thank you very much. So the next topic I would like to do, if it's okay with everyone, I would like to kind of go through the life cycle of a first project. Each of you has experience in the last 12 months something. I would like to ask for our audience, how did you start this project? And before the project started, how complicated or not was it to put together the project team internally and externally? So how did you select the software vendor or the software vendors that you had to work with? And did you try with one, with many? Internally, as I mentioned, which kind of capabilities do you have to assemble team, resources, system? And through the discussion, if you could give advices to the attendees that mentioned they are currently looking for a project in the next 12 months. So Biju, maybe you can start with this discussion.
Sure, and it's a great topic because and the survey is indicative of sort of what's happening, right? I mean, if you talk about process automation a year ago, I think the numbers were probably the same. So you can tell that things are emerging as they go. So a couple things. One was, our intent was always clear, is, how do you cut time to deliver overall value to something? So that was two parts to our thing. Did we pick one particular vendor? We haven't. And that's because I think you have to try different things and almost like maybe to prove a concept, because you have different, organizations have different systems, they have different processes. So I think there's always benefit for customers who are looking or thinking about this to reach out to different vendors and just see, right? Try some process that you have, pick maybe one end-to-end in whatever, supply chain, finance, HR, IT, pick one. Just pick an end-to-end process, try it, and also have some intent on where are all the processes sitting. So like for us, it's in SAP, Oracle, ServiceNow, et cetera. So the system element is, where's all your key processes sitting that you will most likely use, and then I would pick and choose from that and go through across all the providers that and really try them out and see if you get the result that you want. That's part one. Part two, it doesn't, and I think maybe when we were talking about this before, all four of us talked about it, it doesn't eliminate the need for people who understand process and optimization and et cetera. Last thing you want to do is have the sense that somehow this is the silver bullet. Most things aren't, because you still need people to really understand what's coming out and make sense of it. So, build a team of practitioners and or process people that you have who actually look at that data and can really understand, right? Don't get into this thinking that somehow this will give you all the answers, because it won't, right? It'll give you all the data represented in a set of answers, but you still need people to kind of figure this out and what that means, and really what sort of insights you're going to get. So that's part two. you should involve the people you should involve. Generally, my experience has been in this, there's audit, compliance, privacy. Those are generally the kinds of people who should be involved, depending on the type of process that you have, right? And fourth, I would say, is don't try to do this all yourself. I mean, for me, there's no inherent value of trying to figure this out yourself. There are lots of people out there. Really, there's people like yourselves and others who kind of do this for a living. Definitely engage those people to understand what it is. End of the day, as a customer, you have to retain the decision rights as to what you will do. But definitely in the fact-finding phase and really trying to understand, try to engage people who live and do this and educate yourself. And right, that's point 4. The fifth one would be just start. Like don't overthink it. Right? And that's the best thing I can tell you is don't overthink it, don't overanalyze it, and don't think about answering the questions you don't have answers for before you get started. Because part of this is discovering sort of what happens as you go and as you engage partners and products and services and internal people. I think you should set that expectation saying, let's start with something that's tangible. Let's see what the results are and really see what comes out of it. That tells us, it informs us. And always have the questions. I think it's always good to have some questions to what you find answers for. But I found that's the easiest way. Had we not done that, I think we'd still be thinking about it. We would still be wondering about it. We did some trials in a supply chain process. I think the outcomes are pretty good. We got lots of data that came out, and a lot of surprises that people didn't know. And it is not just a system issue. It's also a process issue, and have a strategy that's kind of more with an agile mindset. And I don't mean any methodology, be open to the fact that you'll get something, you'll try something, you'll try to figure it out, it'll make sense, and just move faster from there. I think that's the key, because the space is evolving. There's lots of stuff out there, lots of product services out there. And if you wait for it to stabilize, I think you'll miss the boat. So those are probably 4 or 5 things I would say.
Thank you so much, Biju. Leanne, any insights, any comments, feedback on what Biju said or your personal experience?
Yeah, I think Biju had a number of really great points that I would echo, and I would echo each one of them. I think the one that maybe I would add to is his last point, where he's talking about don't overthink it. I think that really resonates the most with me. I think when you start on your process mining journey, keep it small. Don't try to boil the ocean, because the beauty is what people may not realize. When you start building a model, when you start stitching data sources together, you'll do that once, and you can reuse it. So unlike when, as professionals, we all have put a lot of effort in creating process maps and analyzing those process maps and looking for data. And the reality is, very often, from my experience, once the project is over and we see the results, what do we do with these process maps? How often do we really reuse those? Not that often, right? They often just end up on someone's hard drive, or maybe on a shared drive if we're lucky. The beauty of process mining is, if you start stitching the data, you can not only reuse it, you can also use it as part of your operations. So it's you can start small, because you can just build it out as you go along the way, and it doesn't go to waste. Your efforts never go to waste. So that's, I think, really important to realize, because that's fundamentally different from the way we traditionally think about sort of our projects.
So yeah, most definitively, process mining should be seen as a continuous improvement project, and ideally you should start small and then augment. The father of process mining, Dr. Will van der Hassel, has a famous saying. He basically says that in today's world, it's not a question of should I do it or not. He basically said you cannot afford not to have process mining to manage your process. If you have a sophisticated project that keeps moving, you would be like obviously he has an interest in process mining, and he's very devoted and passionate about it. But he said you cannot afford not to use process mining to monitor your performance and compliance. Thank you. So we talk about the importance of starting small. Rudina, in your organization, you have done project pilots, and I should say maybe pilots with an S. Could you give us some perspective about how TELUS did it?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we didn't start small. We've picked, for our first project, we picked actually quite a large size initiative looking at an end-to-end process. We're very customer first oriented. So we really are moving more and more towards those internal metrics that matter to just us internally to more externally. What does the customer, how does it impacts the customer? So, and like Leanne was saying earlier, it's really hard to piece together the journey from beginning to end, how that ties together. And that's where we felt that process mining could really add value in really truly understanding our end-to-end journey of that customer. And for our first project, we did pick a big initiative. We didn't start small, and as a result, lots of lessons that come with that. I would encourage or really emphasize the point that, like Biju was saying, you need people involvement. You rely heavily on your IT resources as well as your business experts. So make sure that especially for a first project, you're working on something that really matters to your organization, so that you have that buy-in. That buy-in is really straightforward or simpler and easier to get, because you will need people's time. You need to. It's not, just like we said, it's not a one-man show. You will need to rely on a lot of resources to pull this together, especially when you're looking at a larger scale initiative that looking at an end-to-end journey. So yes, people are always part of it. So very, very good. Stakeholder engagement and management along the way is it's really, really important. And it's not a magic bullet, like it said. It's a journey. It's a continuous part of your continuous improvement journey, and you will. It's ongoing work even once you do this first project. In regards to vendors, though, in terms of like how do you get started, is like for TELUS, we evaluated several vendors, and actually different teams are picked projects with different vendors so that we could. Evaluate also what the offerings are out there. So if you can do that, I would also highly encourage that.
Thank you, Rudina. So for the audience, I think it's a good segue. If you're looking at evaluating different vendors, if you look into the resources in your attendees view, you'll see two links. One is a white paper that provides suggestion on what to look at when you select a software vendor or a partner to do your first project. There's also a link to a website that is currently run by scholars. So it's a university that has put it together. It's a very good feature-by-feature comparison of the latest software vendor, and they keep it up to date. There's 2 or 3 recent analysts that put together their own evaluation. Akuting, we're working with the 2 leading vendors according to these analysts, which are Celonis and Mineit, but there's a number of software vendors out there. Most of them have very comparable functionality and keep increasing their capabilities based on what everyone has brought as a best feature. So I hope you can leverage these resources as you're looking for assistance. Rudina, if I may, which kind of lesson learned did you get through these pilots? Any recommendation for the audience about what you have learned so far and what they could apply?
Yeah, so one of the key learnings is to start small. We did not start quite small. We picked more of a mid-size initiative, like I said, a cross-functional end-to-end journey, and looking from a customer lens. So and as a result, our initiative, our project took longer than we planned for. So that's the impact of not starting small. The other key lessons is to be patient, especially in the early phases. And I always kept reminding myself of, just like in define phase, right? You spend a lot of time defining the problem, and it's like a problem well understood is half solved. So just like we do that when we use other process improvement methodologies, similar with process mining, it takes a while to really define, to truly understand, what you're trying to map, where is that data, who do you need to engage. So be patient with yourself and keep your team informed along the journey as to what you're doing. Yeah, those are my 2 key lessons that I think would be, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rudina. Biju, any insights?
Yeah, so I would say, I guess a couple of things. One is, these things will reveal information about what's happening. And you really have to sensitize people that it is not about, this is not a reflection on them, it's a reflection of sort of what happens in organizations. And that the way to drive continuous improvement is to really know what's happening. Because I think a lot of times people can take it more personally, that is somehow a reflection of that they're doing a bad job, and just the consequence of what happens when processes change, but that's just what happens, right? So I think that's one part is everybody has to be in the same context of let's improve something by knowing what we have. I think that has to be the structure. The second one is, I think there's a leadership story about you just have to give, I think Rita talked about it, you gotta have a little bit of patience, because not everything is as quickly as you'd want it, and not everything has to be so precise in the beginning, because some of this stuff you discover as you go. So give it a little bit more. I've seen, and I've heard of cases where it's like, well, what's the business case? And I'm not debating that business cases are important. What I'm saying is that you can get so tied up in it. And my ask of leaders would be, just look around you. Right? You don't need your team to build a business case. Just look around you at what's happening. And that'll be a big enough business case for you to get started. Right? Otherwise, you can get the teams busy, doing lots of stuff, but not really making progress because there's some sense of fear. So this is not a fear thing. This is just about let's know about it, right? And I think that'll drive buy-in and support and so on. And I think, Rudina, those 2 things because people react really violently if suddenly you make it about them and how they're running the process and how it's not working. It's like just junk, right? It's not good. It's not about people who are in it. It's about continually improving and getting better as an organization. I think that has to be the mindset.
Thank you so much, Biju. We have about 4 minutes left before we go to Q&A. So the last topic, we'll try to go quickly. One topic that is dear of mine is that there is a number of companies who did a first project. The project was successful, but then they realized a year or 2 years after, for some reason, attrition, people changed, the champion is no longer working with the company, but the project was not sustainable. Like there was a good first-time analysis, but then it didn't sustain the month or the years. Leanne, any insights about what you think are the factors that would make process mining a sustained initiative and not a one-off project into an organization?
Yeah, sure. So I have to, with the caveat that, it is fairly new. Like the first time I heard about process mining was a year ago, and since then, we went through a proof of concept. So I think in my mind, I am very interested in, I'm still on that journey myself in finding, trying to find out what is the best way to, in the long term, where maybe the function of, or where the capability of process mining really resides. But my perspective at this point in time would be, problem solving at its core will never change, right? Problem solving starts with defining a problem and it finishes with the solution and maybe a control plan. between the problem and the solution, there is a journey, and there is a toolbox that sometimes some people like to call Six Sigma, other people will call Lean, and there is many other toolkits out there that have different names. But ultimately, the objective is the same. It's problem solving. And in my mind, like process mining, someone in my organization, in my previous organization, called it, it's a way to it's the make on steroids. And I really liked the way that he framed it that way, because I think that's exactly what it means to me. And if I think about the make on steroids, the make is a tool, it's an approach. It's an approach to get from a problem to a solution. And therefore, I think that process mining belongs, I think, in a process improvement, continuous improvement, center of excellence type of organization, where the stakeholders in the business are truly stakeholders of the end result of that, and they can use it. But I think to keep it sustained and accurate and up to date, I think there has to be some level of central function around that, I think, to continue. But like I said, I'm very open I'm learning myself, but that's how I see it right now in from experience.
I had a recent discussion with a client, and the client says that process mining would take out of business all of the black belts in his organization. And I said, well, you know what? I think it's actually the very opposite. Process mining will empower the black belt to be much more productive and much more valuable to the organization, because they will now have the tools to do their analysis in a much better fashion, and having them be more productive is maybe the way to make the organization more agile and more adaptive in the future. Yeah. I
think maybe if I could to one more point to that, Frederic, because I think that's a very it's a great question. I think in an ideal world, I think every organization would love to have a full culture of continuous improvement all the way through their organization and their operations. I think the reality is that it requires a certain capability also, and dedication, I think, and experience to problem solve. And operations are typically, they need to run the operations. Whether it's a centralized or decentralized model, that companies go through the cycles of both models. But ultimately, I think you need, where does the capability sit? And I think it's very hard to combine an operational function with the capability of process problem solving in the way that process mining can help.
Thank you, Leanne.
And if I may add, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
If I may add to that is, and I fully agree, being where does process mining reside? So when I first heard about it, I had the same question actually, or it crossed my mind where I was like, oh, is Six Sigma, is this going to be the end of Six Sigma? Because process mining really, with data, truly gives you a picture of how you're doing with all the statistical metrics and there as well. The software does it for you. And like Leanne was saying, no, or Frederic, what you heard from your friend, if anything, it just makes that skill set even more valuable, because you do need, it's still problem solving. You still need people. You need to bring people together. You need to understand truly what you're trying to solve. And then you need to have huge business context to be able to drive solutions and improvements. Data just on its own is very siloed. Without context, it really means nothing. It sits there. And I think for process mining to be sustainable in an organization is you have to build the skill set within. It cannot be just a one person or a few individuals. It does require, it's a field of data science. It does require, it's a new skill set. So you do need to, I think, to build it in. And to Leanne's point, I think it has to be an enablement function. Decentralized or centralized, I think it could work either way, but it has to be an enablement. It can't be owned by an ops team that's very inundated with day-to-day tasks. It's something that you have to really strategically look at where it would best fit. But I think an ops enablement would be a really well-suited place for it.
Thank you.
I would agree. I think, so there's two things I would say. One is you can get caught up when you start in these things, and that'll suck the life out of you, right? So what I would say is you can do both. One is you can start, because at the end of the day, you need some functional people, you need some technical people. That's kind of the universe we live in today, right? It's very, very rare that one function will just do it, because you need multiple kind of stakeholders and context to run the show. So what I would say is just start with that, right? And then in the process, as you discover it, figure out where it sits. I agree with both of them. I think there is when you're trying to set standards and guidelines and so on, there's a level of centralization that's good, because you can drive consistency. And then once you have that, you can definitely democratize it so that others can use it. And within whatever the context is, because they're not going to have access to all the systems and so on. But it's same with automation, right? There's lots of automation opportunities that departments can just do without some big central, function kind of overseeing everything, because you can become complicated. So who owns it? Right now, if you're starting, don't care about it. Just start. Find those 2-3 people who are smart and who actually want to drive something, and start driving it. And in that process, use providers, consultants, et cetera, to figure out, and just do it cheap. Like, this doesn't have to be some big, CEO-driven program. It just doesn't, because how many continuous improvement things do you do where you have this massive undertaking? And where do massive undertakings go? Not very far, actually, unless it's a sustained commitment over time. So that'd be my thing.
Thank you, Biju. There's one question that came up that I just had a chance to read through as we were speaking. So Riza from CIBC mentioned that he sees a lot of potential into process mining, but he could think of situations where either we don't have the proper data to do an analysis, or the data might be, the quality of the data might be missing. So just a quick answer to Riza. There are really two types of projects that we would do. Sometimes there's a built-in connector between the process mining software and the source system. So a lot of projects were procured to pay. And if you have SAP, all of the software vendors have a direct connector into this module, and then the data should be of good quality. But there are many cases, and Rudina at TELUS mentioned one of them, a complex project that pulls data from multiple systems. And from there, you really need to have experts that understand this data, because the system were maybe necessarily designed to have a unique key that match it. So yeah, it's a very good point, and it can be a challenge. There was a question.
One thing I would add is don't let this bad data kind of cripple you, right? Part of the process is to know you have bad stuff, is you do it. That's the only way you'll fix it, versus imagining that things may be bad, and it may be, but you'll have no proof that it is. So get the proof and then fix it.
Okay, great. I think we're running a little at the end of the conversation. There were other questions. We will make sure that we respond to you offline right after the event. Nicole, would you have anything to add, or?
I do. So thank you very much to Biju, Leanne, Rudina, and Rick for your interesting and informative panel discussion. For those in the audience, if you want to listen again, this webinar will be available on demand shortly. And thank you to you wherever you are for taking the time to listen in. We look forward to having you on the next session starting in just a few moments. And again, thank you, Biju, Leanne, Rudina, and Frederic for a great panel discussion.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.